The city skyline shimmered in the distance as Emily Carter stood by the grand floor-to-ceiling windows of their lavish penthouse. The twinkling lights of New York City stretched before her like an endless sea of possibilities, one she no longer felt a part of. Her reflection in the glass revealed tired eyes, the once vibrant sparkle now dulled by years of loneliness. She glanced at the ornate clock on the wall, 9:45 p.m. He wasn't coming home on time. Emily had once been the heartbeat of her husband's world. When she first met Alexander Carter, he was an ambitious, charming entrepreneur with dreams that reached the stars. His love had been intoxicating, overwhelming even. Every moment with him had been like living in a fairy tale, and she had never doubted for a second that she was the queen of his world. But time had a cruel way of unraveling even the strongest bonds. Alexander had built his business empire from the ground up. What had started as a small startup had transformed into Carter Enterprises, a multimillion-dollar corporation. With success came responsibility, and with responsibility came distance. Slowly, the long nights at the office became longer, business meetings stretched into weekends, and their once passionate love dwindled into routine exchanges and unspoken words. Emily had tried everything, planning romantic getaways, cooking his favorite meals, waiting up late just to steal a moment of his time. But her efforts were met with cold indifference. His gaze no longer lingered on her the way it used to. His touches, once electrifying, were now mechanical. It was as though he had placed her on a shelf, a trophy wife to be admired from afar but never truly seen. Tonight was no different. The dining table, elegantly set with candles flickering, had gone untouched. She had spent hours preparing his favorite dishes, hoping that maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. But as she sat alone, staring at her untouched meal, reality settled in. She had become invisible. Just as she was about to clear the table, the sound of the front door unlocking echoed through the penthouse. Her heart leaped, an instinctive reaction of hope, only to be crushed the moment she saw him. Alexander entered with his phone pressed to his ear, his deep voice discussing profit margins and shareholder concerns. He didn't even glance her way. He walked past her straight into his study, shutting the door behind him. No, hello. No, sorry I'm late. No acknowledgement. Emily stood frozen, the weight of neglect suffocating her. For years she had endured this, convincing herself that love still existed between them. But tonight something inside her cracked. She wouldn't wait in the shadows anymore. A week later, Emily found herself at an exclusive charity gala, one she had attended alone again. Alexander had claimed he was too busy with meetings, though she suspected he simply didn't care enough to accompany her anymore. She was used to the pitying glances from other guests, the whispered gossip about the CEO's wife who was always alone. But tonight a different gaze lingered on her. Damien Laurent. The name was enough to send ripples through the business world. A self-made billionaire, known not only for his ruthless business tactics but also for his undeniable charm. He had a reputation for getting what he wanted. And tonight his attention was on her. "You shouldn't be left alone at a gala like this," he murmured as he stepped beside her, offering her a glass of champagne. Emily hesitated before accepting it, the warmth of his presence sending an unfamiliar thrill through her. It had been years since someone looked at her as if she were the most fascinating thing in the room. She laughed softly, a sound she barely recognized as her own. "I suppose I've gotten used to it." Damien arched an eyebrow, his piercing gaze holding hers. "A woman like you should never have to get used to being overlooked." His words struck a nerve, awakening something deep inside her, a longing she had buried for too long. For the first time in years, Emily felt seen. That night marked the beginning of something dangerous. Damien didn't just offer her fleeting words of flattery. He pursued her with a relentless charm that made her heart race. He would send flowers to her doorstep, handwritten notes filled with admiration and warmth, the kind Alexander had long stopped giving. At first she resisted. She reminded herself that she was married, that vows meant something. But with each passing day, It became harder to ignore the way Damien made her feel alive. One evening, she found herself at an art exhibition where Damien had personally invited her. She had intended to decline, but something inside her urged her to go. As she wandered through the gallery, admiring the intricate paintings, she felt a presence behind her. "I had a feeling you'd come," Damien's voice was smooth, confident. She turned, meeting his gaze. "I shouldn't be here." "Maybe," he admitted, stepping closer. "But you are." Emily's breath hitched as he reached out, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so intimate, so tender, that she almost forgot what it felt like to be touched this way. She knew she was playing with fire. But for the first time in years she didn't care. Alexander barely noticed the shift at first. He was too consumed with work, his mind constantly occupied with deals, contracts, and deadlines. Emily had always been there, silent, patient, waiting. But then something changed. She stopped waiting. She no longer asked if he'd be home for dinner. No longer left him texts asking how his day was. The quiet desperation in her eyes had been replaced by something colder, something distant. And then came the flowers. He arrived home late one evening to find an extravagant bouquet on the coffee table. A note was nestled between the roses. "You deserve to be adored." Alexander's blood ran cold. For the first time in years he felt something other than detachment, jealousy. A searing, possessive kind of jealousy that clawed at his insides. Who was D? He clenched his fists, his mind racing with possibilities. Had he truly been so blind? Had he neglected her so much that another man had stepped in? Panic surged through him as he realized the bitter truth. He had taken her for granted, and now he might lose her. Alexander Carter was a man who had conquered industries, built an empire from nothing. But in his pursuit of success he had overlooked the most valuable thing in his life. And now she was slipping away. The air inside the Carter penthouse was thick with tension, an unspoken storm brewing beneath the silence. Alexander Carter stood in the dimly lit living room, gripping the note that had arrived with the flowers. "You deserve to be adored." His jaw clenched so tightly it ached. Arrival. For the first time in years, fear gripped him. Not the fear of losing a deal or watching stock prices fall. No, this was something more personal, something deeper. He was losing Emily. And worst of all, he hadn't even realized how far gone she already was. But he would not allow it. She was his wife. His. Emily stepped into the room then, her silhouette elegant yet distant, like a vision he had once known but now barely recognized. She paused when she saw the flowers, her expression unreadable. "Who sent these?" Alexander's voice was sharp, controlled, but beneath it there was something else. Something raw. Emily met his gaze, her lips curving into a faint, almost sad smile. "Would it matter if I told you?" Her words struck like a slap, leaving an ache deeper than he anticipated. She wasn't denying it. And that truth rattled him more than he cared to admit. Alexander had always prided himself on control. In the boardroom he dictated the rules. He set the pace. But here in his own marriage he was losing his grip. Oh, that was unacceptable. He took a step closer, his voice softer now, edged with something unfamiliar. Desperation. "Emily. Is there something I should know?" She exhaled slowly, turning her back to him as she traced her fingers over the petals of the flowers. "You tell me, Alexander." Her voice was calm, but the emotion beneath it was anything but. "For 7 years I have waited. For 7 years I have tried to remind you that I exist, that I am more than just an accessory in your life. But you never noticed. Not until now." Her words twisted like a dagger in his chest. She wasn't wrong. He had built an empire, but in doing so he had neglected the very foundation that once kept him grounded, her. Alexander moved forward until he was standing just behind her. He reached out, hesitated, then finally let his fingers ghost over her arm. The contact sent a jolt through both of them. A reminder of something long lost. "Emily," he murmured, his voice strained, "I know I've failed you." She laughed then, a bitter, broken sound. "You know." She turned to face him now, her eyes burning with something fierce. Do you have any idea what it feels like to sleep next to a man who doesn't see you? To sit across from him at dinner and realize he's a million miles away? To ache for his touch only to be met with silence? Her words hit him harder than any boardroom battle ever had. She was angry, no, she was hurt. And she had every right to be. But what gutted him most was the realization that she had found that attention elsewhere. I never meant to neglect you, he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. I thought I was building a future for us. She shook her head. No, Alexander. You were building a future for yourself. Her gaze flickered to the note in his hand, her lips pressing into a thin line. And now? Now you're only paying attention because someone else has. His grip on the note tightened. Who is he? Her expression didn't falter. Does it matter? It mattered more than anything. Alexander felt something primal, possessive stir within him. He had spent years focusing on his business, convinced that Emily would always be there, waiting, patient. But she wasn't waiting anymore. She had found something or someone that made her feel alive again. And the thought of that shattered him. The next day, Alexander did something he hadn't done in years. He cleared his schedule. Meetings could wait. Stockholders could wait. Emily couldn't. He needed to remind her of what they once had. To show her that she still mattered. That they still mattered. But fate had a cruel sense of timing. That afternoon, as he was pulling up to their country club, one of Emily's favorite places, he saw her. And she wasn't alone. Damien Laurent stood beside her, the very image of ease and confidence. The man was everything Alexander despised, charming, reckless, a disruptor in both business and apparently in his personal life. And Emily? She was smiling. Not the polite, empty smile she gave at business functions. No, this was different. She was glowing. Alexander felt his stomach twist as he watched Damien lean in, whisper something in her ear that made her laugh, really laugh, in a way she hadn't with him in years. A fire ignited inside him, something raw and unrelenting. Enough. Emily felt his presence before she even turned around. Alexander Carter had always commanded attention. Even now, as he stood just a few feet away, his icy blue gaze locked onto Damien with the kind of territorial intensity that sent shivers down her spine. She swallowed, her pulse quickening. Damien smirked, completely unfazed by Alexander's sudden arrival. If anything, he seemed to enjoy the tension. Alexander, Damien greeted smoothly, offering a handshake Alexander pointedly ignored. To what do we owe the pleasure? Emily could see the barely restrained fury in Alexander's clenched jaw, in the way his fists tightened at his sides. I wasn't aware my wife needed company, Alexander said, his voice deceptively calm. Damien chuckled, tilting his head. Perhaps that's because you never asked what she needed. The words struck like a bullet and Alexander's jaw twitched. Emily held her breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. But instead of rage, Alexander did something unexpected. He turned to her. Emily. His voice was lower now, quieter. There was no command in it, no arrogance. Just something dangerously close to pleading. Come home. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken promises. Emily's heart pounded. For years she had waited to hear those words, to feel like she mattered to him again. And now, when she finally had a glimpse of happiness elsewhere, now he chose to fight? Her eyes flickered between the two men, the husband who had neglected her and the man who had made her feel alive again. The choice should have been easy. But nothing about love ever was. The weight of Alexander's words, come home, hung in the air, thick with tension. Emily's pulse raced, her mind whirling between the man who had spent years neglecting her and the one who had made her feel seen for the first time in forever. She had waited so long for Alexander to notice her, to fight for her, but now that he was finally doing it, why did it feel too late? Damien stood beside her, his expression unreadable, but she could feel the silent challenge radiating from him. He wasn't backing down. He wasn't intimidated. And that only made the situation more volatile. A long silence stretched between the three of them. Then Damien smirked. I think the real question is, does Emily want to go home? His words were like a dagger twisting into Alexander's gut. Emily swallowed, her gaze flickering between them. A part of her wanted to see Alexander suffer, to make him feel the pain of every lonely night, every moment she had cried herself to sleep. But another part, the part that had once loved him so deeply, ached at the sheer desperation in his eyes. He had never seen him like this. Alexander Carter was a man who commanded boardrooms, dictated the fate of multimillion-dollar deals with a single word. He never begged. He never pleaded. But right now he looked at her as if she was the only thing that mattered. As if he was terrified of losing her. Emily took a shaky breath, forcing herself to find her voice. I don't know, she admitted. It was the only honest answer she could give. Alexander flinched, but he recovered quickly. His mask of control slipped back into place, but she could see the cracks beneath it. Damien sighed, slipping his hands into his pockets. I think that says enough. No, Alexander snapped, stepping forward. His gaze was locked onto Emily, intense, unwavering. That means there's still a chance. Damien chuckled, shaking his head. And what exactly are you offering her, Carter? More empty promises? More nights spent alone while you drown in work? Alexander's eyes darkened. Stay out of this. I don't think I will, Damien said smoothly. He turned to Emily, his voice softer now. You deserve more than just being someone's afterthought, Emily. And you know it. Her breath hitched. Because deep down she did know it. But knowing and accepting it were two different things. That night, Emily sat alone in her penthouse, staring at the city lights through the window. The same view she had spent years looking at while waiting for Alexander to come home. Her mind was a battlefield of emotions. Memories of the past flooded her, how he had once been the man who made her feel like she was the center of his universe. The love letters, the spontaneous weekend getaways, the way he had kissed her like she was the only woman in existence. Where had that man gone? Had she been foolish to believe he could come back? A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. She knew who it was before she even opened it. Alexander stood there, a mix of vulnerability and determination in his eyes. He held a single red rose, an old habit from their early days, when he used to surprise her with one every Friday night. He hadn't done that in years. I know I don't deserve to ask for another chance, he said, his voice raw. But I'm asking anyway. Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to be strong. To tell him it was too late. But the way he looked at her, like she was slipping through his fingers, made her hesitate. I don't know if I can trust you, she whispered. He exhaled slowly, stepping closer. Then let me prove it to you. She searched his face, trying to find the man she had fallen in love with beneath the one who had let her down so many times. Why now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Pain flickered in his gaze. Because I was a fool. Because I let my ambition blind me to the most important thing in my life. Because losing you terrifies me more than anything else. Emily's heart pounded. She had wanted to hear those words for so long. But words weren't enough anymore. You can't just say that and expect everything to be okay, she said, stepping back. You had years to show me I mattered, Alexander. And now that someone else has, now you decide to care. His jaw clenched, jealousy flashing in his eyes. I've always cared. She shook her head. Not in the way I needed. Silence fell between them. Then Alexander did something unexpected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Emily's breath caught. I was going to wait, he said softly, opening it to reveal a delicate diamond bracelet. But waiting is what got us here in the first place. She stared at the bracelet, her emotions in turmoil. I designed this years ago, he admitted. It was supposed to be an anniversary gift, but I kept postponing. I told myself work was more important. That you'd understand. That you'd always be there. His voice cracked slightly. But I was wrong. Emily's fingers trembled as she reached for the bracelet, brushing against the cold metal. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, Alexander continued. But give me a chance. Let me remind you why you fell in love with me. Tears burned in her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to. But Damien's words echoed in her mind. You deserve more than being someone's afterthought. She stepped back, shaking her head. I can't. Not yet. Alexander's face fell, but he nodded slowly, accepting her answer. I'll wait, he said firmly. As long as it takes. 2 days later, Damien showed up at her favorite cafe. You look like someone who's overthinking everything, he mused, sliding into the seat across from her. Emily sighed, stirring her coffee. Maybe because I am. He leaned forward, his gaze searching hers. Do you still love him? The question made her heart stutter. She swallowed hard. I don't know. Damien tilted his head. I think you do. But I also think you're afraid. Her hands tightened around her cup. Afraid of what? Afraid that he'll go back to the man he was. That he'll hurt you again. Emily bit her lip. Wouldn't you be? Damien exhaled, nodding. I would. Which is why I'm going to say something that might surprise you. She looked up, curiosity flickering in her eyes. If you still have even 1 ounce of love left for him, then make him fight for you. Really fight. And if he doesn't, then you'll know. Emily stared at him, her heart twisting. Damien. He smirked, but there was something bittersweet in it. I want you to be happy, Emily. Even if that happiness isn't with me. Her chest ached at his words. He had been her escape, her light in the darkness. But even he knew that some battles had to be fought before a choice could truly be made. And now, for the first time in years, she held all the power. The weight of the past few days hung heavily on Emily's shoulders. Standing at the edge of her balcony, she stared at the sprawling city below. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, a beautiful contrast to the storm raging within her heart. Alexander had finally woken up, finally seen her. But was it enough? Damien had given her something Alexander never had. A choice. He wasn't forcing her, wasn't manipulating her into deciding. He had simply asked her one question that haunted her thoughts. Do you still love him? And she didn't know the answer. Behind her, the sound of the front door unlocking pulled her from her thoughts. She turned, heart pounding. Alexander stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room like a storm on the horizon. Emily took a steadying breath. How did you get in? He lifted a key, the one she had never taken back from him. I wasn't sure if I was still welcome. She crossed her arms, fighting the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. You shouldn't just come in like this. I know, he admitted. But I didn't want to leave things unfinished. She raised an eyebrow. And what exactly is unfinished? Alexander stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Us. Emily felt the air shift between them, thick with unresolved tension. He wasn't the same man who had ignored her for years. He looked different, felt different. And yet part of her still wasn't sure if she could trust this change. I need to know, he continued, his voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. Is there still a chance for us? Or have I lost you completely? She swallowed hard. Why now, Alexander? Why are you fighting now when I've already started moving on? His jaw tightened. Because I was a fool. And because I didn't see what was in front of me until I almost lost it. She studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity. And how do I know you won't forget again? Alexander exhaled, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to her. Emily hesitated before opening it. Her breath caught as she recognized the familiar handwriting, her own. It was a letter she had written to him years ago. A plea. A desperate, vulnerable confession about how much she missed him. You kept this, she whispered. Alexander nodded. I read it over and over again these past few nights. I let myself become someone I promised I'd never be, the kind of man who forgets what truly matters. He took a step closer. But I don't want to be that man anymore. I want to fight for you, Emily. If you'll let me. Tears burned at the edges of her vision. For so long she had dreamed of these words. But was love enough to erase the years of neglect? Emily needed time. She needed proof that Alexander wasn't just saying what she wanted to hear. So she made a decision. If you're serious about fighting for me, she said slowly, then I need you to prove it. Alexander straightened, determination flashing in his eyes. Tell me what to do. She hesitated before speaking. Take a break from work. 1 month. His eyes widened slightly, and she knew this was his greatest challenge yet. Work had always been his first priority. But if he truly wanted her back, he needed to show her that she was more important. 1 month, he repeated. Emily nodded. No emails, no late-night meetings, no distractions. Just us. Alexander's jaw tensed, and for a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then slowly he nodded. Okay. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to agree so easily. I'll put everything on hold, he continued. Whatever it takes. Emily studied him, waiting for the excuses, for the justifications. But none came. Maybe, just maybe, he really had changed. That evening, Emily met Damien at the rooftop bar where they had spent so many late nights talking. He was already waiting for her, a glass of whiskey in hand. Let me guess, he said as she approached, his smile wry. You chose him. Emily hesitated, sitting down across from him. I chose to give him a chance. Damien studied her carefully. And if he fails? She exhaled. Then I walk away for good. There was a long pause before Damien nodded. Then I hope for your sake he doesn't. Emily looked at him, sadness washing over her. Damien. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm not going to beg you to change your mind. She bit her lip. I don't want to lose you completely. His expression softened. You won't. But I need some time. She nodded in understanding. Damien had been her escape, her safe place when Alexander had failed her. And now she was choosing to risk everything for the man who had broken her in the first place. Be happy, Emily, Damien said as he stood. That's all I ever wanted for you. And with that he walked away. The next morning, Emily awoke to the smell of coffee and something she hadn't seen in years, Alexander in the kitchen. She leaned against the doorway, watching as he awkwardly flipped pancakes, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. You're cooking? She asked, amused. He glanced up, looking sheepish. Well, trying. She laughed softly, stepping closer. Felt foreign easy. Like they had rewound time to a version of themselves that hadn't yet been broken. Alexander gestured to the table where fresh roses sat in a vase. I figured it was time I started remembering the small things. Emily's heart clenched. This was new. This was effort. But would it last? She reached for a cup of coffee, her fingers brushing against his. Let's take this one day at a time, she whispered. Alexander met her gaze, nodding. One day at a time. The mornings felt different now. For the first time in years, Emily woke up to the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the sound of soft humming coming from the kitchen. She wasn't sure when Alexander had started doing these things, but she found herself hesitating each time before stepping out of bed, as if afraid that it was all a dream. And maybe in a way it was. Alexander was trying. She could see it in the way he put his phone away during breakfast, in the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. He asked her about her day, listened when she spoke, and even started planning date nights again, small things that had once been routine but had faded into nothing over the years. It was everything she had wanted. Everything she had begged for. So why did it still feel like something was missing? One evening they sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle like 1,000 distant stars. Alexander leaned back, exhaling slowly. I didn't realize how much I missed this, he admitted. Emily turned to him. Missed what? Just being here. With you. His voice was quiet, but there was a sincerity in his eyes that made her heart ache. He swallowed. You had plenty of chances before, Alexander. He nodded, gaze dropping to his hands. I know. A heavy silence settled between them. I feel like I'm learning you all over again, he continued. Like I'm meeting you for the first time. Emily studied him carefully. And what do you think so far? A slow smile curved his lips. I think I don't deserve you. She wasn't sure how to respond to that. Because maybe he was right. She exhaled, looking away. It's hard, you know. Trying to believe this will last. Alexander reached for her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. Then let me keep proving it. She wanted to believe him. She really did. But deep down, something still nagged at her. Was love supposed to feel like this? Like something fragile, constantly at risk of breaking? Days passed and Alexander remained consistent. He followed through on his promise, no work calls, no meetings, just them. And yet the doubts lingered in Emily's heart. Then one afternoon everything changed. She was at a bookstore when she felt a familiar presence beside her. Didn't think I'd see you here. Damien's voice was smooth as ever, but there was something guarded about his expression. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Damien. He smirked. So, how's the perfect husband routine going? She sighed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. He's trying. Damien tilted his head. And is that enough? Emily hesitated. That was the real question, wasn't it? Before she could answer, Damien leaned in, his voice low. Tell me something, Emily. When you're with him, does your heart race? Do you feel alive? Her breath hitched. She wanted to say yes. But she couldn't. Damien stepped back, nodding as if he already knew the answer. I see. Damien. She started, but he shook his head. I get it, he murmured. You made your choice. She opened her mouth to speak, but he was already walking away. And as she watched him disappear, a hollow feeling settled in her chest. That night, as she sat across from Alexander at dinner, she couldn't stop thinking about Damien's words. Do you feel alive? Alexander was saying something about their next weekend getaway, but she wasn't listening. Emily. She blinked, snapping back to reality. Sorry. What were you saying? He frowned slightly. You've been distant all evening. She hesitated before finally setting her fork down. Alexander. Are we forcing this? His face paled slightly. What? She exhaled. This. Are we trying so hard to fix what's broken that we're ignoring the fact that we've changed? Alexander's jaw tightened. Are you saying you don't want to try anymore? She shook her head. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't feel the same way I used to. Silence. Then softly he said, neither do I. Emily's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to admit it. I love you, he continued, his voice strained. But I don't know if we'll ever get back to the way we were. Tears burned in her eyes. Then what do we do? Alexander reached across the table, taking her hand. We stop trying to relive the past. And start figuring out if there's a future. Her heart ached at the honesty in his words. Because deep down she knew the truth. Love wasn't just about trying, it was about feeling. And something inside her was telling her that maybe, just maybe, she had already moved on. The weight of the conversation from the night before lingered in Emily's mind as she sat on the edge of their bed, staring out at the city that had been both a sanctuary and a prison. She had spent years begging for Alexander's attention. Years trying to fix a love that had faded into routine, convincing herself that if she just held on long enough, the man she fell in love with would return. But now, as he slept beside her, his breathing slow and steady, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to fight anymore. Not because she was angry. Not because she didn't care. But because some things weren't meant to be saved. And maybe their love was one of them. Later that morning, Emily found Alexander in the living room, scrolling through his phone absent-mindedly. Can we talk? She asked. He looked up, immediately sensing the weight behind her words. He set his phone down. Of course. Emily took a deep breath. I think we've been lying to ourselves. Alexander's jaw tensed. About what? He swallowed. About us. A silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. I wanted so badly to believe that we could fix this, she continued, voice trembling. That if you just tried, if you just showed up, everything would go back to the way it was. Alexander's hands clenched into fists, his expression unreadable. But the truth is, she whispered, we're not the same people we were back then. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Emily, I love you. Her heart twisted. I know. And I love you too. His eyes flashed with hope, but she shook her head. Loving someone isn't always enough. Alexander's breath hitched. We're holding on because we're afraid to let go, she continued, tears welling in her eyes. Afraid of what it means if we admit that this, us, isn't working anymore. Alexander stood, pacing the room. So what are you saying? His voice was tight, strained. Emily wiped at her tears. I think we need to stop fighting for something that doesn't exist anymore. Alexander turned to her, his expression shattered. You're saying you want to leave. She swallowed the lump in her throat. I'm saying I need to. A deep, aching silence settled between them. Then softly Alexander said, Is there someone else? Emily hesitated. She wouldn't lie to him. There was. His jaw clenched. Damien. She nodded. But this isn't about him. This is about us. Alexander exhaled sharply, his shoulders slumping. And there's nothing I can do to change your mind? She stepped closer, reaching for his hand. Alexander, you did everything I asked you to. You tried. But love isn't about just going through the motions. It's about how you feel. And the truth is, I don't feel what I used to. His fingers curled around hers for a brief moment before he let go. And that was it. The end of their love story. The day Emily left, it rained. She stood in the doorway of their penthouse, a single suitcase by her side, watching as Alexander sat on the couch, staring blankly at the floor. She had expected him to fight, to argue, to tell her she was making a mistake. But instead he simply whispered, Take care of yourself. She blinked back tears. You too. And then she walked away. For the first time in years she wasn't looking back. Weeks passed. Emily had moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city, focusing on rediscovering herself, who she was without the weight of a failing marriage. And then one evening as she sat in her favorite cafe, flipping through a book, a familiar voice cut through the air. Didn't think I'd see you here. Her heart skipped. Damien. She looked up, finding him standing there, smirking slightly, though there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. Mind if I sit? He asked. Emily gestured to the seat across from her, her pulse racing. They sat in silence for a moment before Damien spoke. So, does this mean you finally chose yourself? She smiled softly. Yeah. I think I did. He tilted his head, watching her carefully. And now that you have. What's next? She met his gaze, feeling something stir inside her. A spark. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. I guess I'll just have to see where life takes me, she murmured. Damien grinned. Well, if you ever need company on that journey. She laughed, shaking her head. Are you always this persistent? He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a teasing whisper. Only for the things that are worth it. Emily's heart pounded, but this time it wasn't from fear or sadness. It was excitement. A feeling she had almost forgotten. And for the first time in a long, long time, she felt alive.